Generous people are not unlucky, they're targeted. Sweetheart, your biggest weakness isn't money, it's your heart. The first time I noticed Evan, it felt like stepping into a life I wasn't meant to enter. Brooklyn, late evening, the streets glowing under streetlights soaked in rain, reflections stretching across cracked sidewalks. He stood outside a bookstore, jacket half-zipped, phone in hand, smiling at nothing in particular. The kind of smile that made you believe in possibilities again. I was new to New York, still learning how to exist in a city that never paused for anyone. Evan felt like a pause, a soft moment in a place built on noise. He worked in creative media, always chasing new projects, always surrounded by ideas. He spoke in futures, not realities. Everything he planned was always about what was coming next, never about what existed now. I admired that optimism. In America, ambition is sacred. Dreamers are treated like heroes. Our relationship unfolded like a montage. Coffee shops in Williamsburg, late walks across the Brooklyn Bridge, rooftops with cheap wine and expensive views. Everything felt cinematic, carefully framed, like something meant to be remembered. What I didn't notice at first was how invisible my role had already become. I paid for the coffee, I booked the rides, I covered the tickets. It happened naturally, without discussion, without negotiation. I told myself it was temporary. He was just getting on his feet. He was just between opportunities. That was the phrase I heard most often, between opportunities. At first, it felt generous. Later, it felt necessary. Eventually, it felt expected. The small expenses blended into larger ones. Groceries turned into rent assistance. Transportation turned into car repairs. Emotional support turned into financial dependency. The pattern formed so quietly that I didn't even realize when I crossed the line from partner to provider. I justified it through love. I told myself that real relationships required sacrifice, that supporting someone through struggle was part of building a future together. I believed that generosity was proof of commitment, but my bank account started telling a different story. Every month I watched my savings shrink. Every transfer carried the same justification. It was always temporary. It was the last time. It was always for us. Meanwhile, Evan remained unchanged. His struggles stayed consistent. His projects stayed imaginary. His need stayed constant. The only thing that evolved was my exhaustion. I noticed it first in my body. The constant fatigue, the weight in my chest when I opened financial apps, the anxiety I felt before checking my balance. I wasn't tired from work. I was tired from carrying 2 lives on 1 income. The city that once felt exciting started feeling heavy. The same streets that had sparked romance now felt like corridors of loss. I had built memories everywhere. Restaurants I paid for, rooftops I funded, trips I sponsored. Each place became a receipt. I didn't feel angry. I felt responsible. Responsible for his comfort. Responsible for his survival. Responsible for the version of him I believed in. That belief became my trap. The generosity that once felt like strength slowly became obligation. I wasn't choosing to give anymore. I was afraid to stop, afraid of being selfish, afraid of breaking the story I had invested in. By the end of the first year, I had spent thousands without realizing it. Not on myself, not on growth, on maintaining someone else's lifestyle. The realization didn't come with drama. It came quietly one night as I sat alone in my apartment, scrolling through months of transactions, watching how my life had slowly been transferred into someone else's. That was the moment I understood that financial betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it wears affection. Sometimes it speaks in dreams. Sometimes it hides behind the illusion of love. And I had walked into it willingly. Generosity doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes slowly, like water carving into stone. At some point, Evan stopped pretending to struggle. He became comfortable with dependency. The urgency disappeared from his plans. The ambition faded into routine. His days became calm, while mine became calculated. I started noticing how little emotional investment existed. Conversations felt shallow. Attention felt conditional. Affection felt timed. Everything I received felt connected to something I had already given. The relationship no longer felt mutual. It felt managed. I realized that I wasn't being loved. I was being relied upon. There's a dangerous difference between the two. Love builds together. Reliance consumes silently. I documented everything, not for revenge, but for clarity. Every dollar spent, every bill covered, every expense disguised as necessity. The total was overwhelming. Months of my labor converted into someone else's comfort. And the worst part wasn't the money. It was the absence of accountability. There was no gratitude, no urgency to change, no desire to contribute. The imbalance had become normal. My identity shifted without me noticing. I wasn't someone being chosen anymore. I was someone being used. The emotional exhaustion became physical. I slept poorly. I felt tense. I avoided checking my finances. I avoided discussing the future. Deep down, I already knew there was no future being built, only a present being drained. The realization hit slowly. I wasn't in a partnership. I was in a system where my role was to stabilize and his role was to receive. And because I had allowed it for so long, stopping felt cruel. Withdrawal felt like betrayal. Setting boundaries felt like abandonment. That's how financial abuse survives, not through force, through guilt. I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of becoming someone who said no. The city reflected my state of mind. New York remained loud, crowded, fast, while I felt invisible inside it. I had sacrificed my own stability to preserve someone else's illusion of progress. The emotional manipulation wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. Comfort replaced effort. Dependency replaced ambition. Expectation replaced gratitude. And I allowed all of it. By the time I accepted what was happening, the damage was already done. Not just financially, but psychologically. I had trained myself to believe that my worth existed in what I could provide. I had become valuable only when I was useful. That realization broke something inside me. The silence of no longer sending money, the silence of no longer checking on someone else's needs, the silence of finally facing my own. Walking away felt unnatural. I had built my identity around giving. Without it, I felt empty, lost, unnecessary. But slowly, something changed. The anxiety faded, the tension eased, the constant financial pressure disappeared. For the first time in years, my money stayed where it belonged. My time stayed my own. My energy returned to me. I began rebuilding, not just savings, but self-respect. I restructured my finances. I created boundaries. I learned to observe behavior instead of believing words. I also confronted the emotional damage, the shame, the embarrassment, the self-blame. Therapy taught me what I couldn't accept alone. Manipulation doesn't make you weak. It means someone recognized your empathy and exploited it. I wasn't foolish. I was generous in a world that rewards consumption. And I learned the most important lesson of my life. Generosity without boundaries is self-destruction disguised as kindness. I didn't stop being kind. I stopped being available for exploitation. Now I measure relationships differently, not by how much I give, but by how balanced the exchange feels. Not by promises, but by consistency. Not by charm, but by effort. The city feels different now. Brooklyn feels lighter. The same streets that once reflected my loss now reflect recovery. I walk them without weight, without obligation. without debt to anyone's expectations. I no longer fund dreams that aren't mine. I no longer rescue adults from consequences. I no longer mistake emotional attachment for financial responsibility. And most importantly, I no longer confuse being needed with being loved. Because love does not require sacrifice that empties you. Love does not survive on imbalance. Love does not grow from dependency. The real betrayal wasn't the money. It was losing myself while trying to save someone else. And the real victory wasn't leaving. It was finally choosing myself without guilt.